It's another Manly Monday, and this Manly Monday we are talking childhood abuse, neglect, and emotional invalidation, and how that can make you an asshole in the present. And this is not to invalidate anybody. You guys know I'm a self-described asshole. This is Manly Monday, so we're a bit more rough and tumble with the talk. But I do want to be clear off the top. I'm a little hesitant to talk about this just because it can itself, using broad strokes examples, come across as invalidating. So I want to say that's not the intent. It's just the nature of this medium. It's so hard to know what's going to make people feel called out because everybody watching this video is at a different point in terms of emotional awareness and regulation and skills and distress tolerance and all that stuff. And just because there's no intent to invalidate somebody doesn't mean you don't feel invalidated by something, and feelings are valid. That's the takeaway from this. Feelings are valid. And this is where people start getting very defensive based on prior bad past experiences that are a combination of gaps in emotional skill sets, but also people actually being invalidating. And I decided to talk about this week because I use colored pens in my one-on-one client stuff because it's a note to me of the emotion that someone's having. I don't have to take clinical notes. I have my own system, and there was a lot of raw colors this week. I'm not going to tell people what they are. I use unusual colors. Red is not anger, because that's too obvious. So, but it is a note to myself, and there was a lot of rawness because with a lot of clients now, and if you want to sign up for a Leanna Care session, link is in the description box below. But there was a lot of raw. And the challenge when you hit this level of work is we are literally rewiring neural pathways that got shaped into self-torture devices by childhood neglect, invalidation, and outright abuse. Now, the first culprit that we tend to look to here is parents. But I'm finding a lot, even people with good parents have a lot of damage from school and teachers and other kids. Now, we do need to have a lot more discussions as a society about abusive moms. That's going to take hours and hours and hours. I could do an entire podcast series on abusive mothers, the stealth bombers of fucking your kids up. But we don't have time for that today. So if you like this kind of content, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. Gets you access to the Discord or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it, coffee.com/LeannaK. The Stellar Blade, I will be playing Stellar Blade. It funded in like 2 hours. So that was so definitive. That was kind of definitive. I'm still trying to figure out whether I want to do it as myself or Beelzebub, because Beelzebub would be fun. I am terrified of running afoul of Twitch's very nonsensical to mind brain body censorship laws regarding female anatomies. I walk around this way. I didn't ask to be, a 34 eye bra. That was I. Yeah, I think that's, I don't know if that's triple F or above in American sizes. But anyway, it's a lot. And I get into issues here. I am am paranoid about it. And part of that is the intense amounts of different kind of body shaming that I got as a kid. And we talk a lot about body shaming in girls. We don't talk the same way about body shaming in boys. But when there's all these very strident messages out there about the male gaze and, not just body shaming, but, sex shaming. This idea that men are inherently predatory. Any attraction a man feels is dirty. I apologize for triggering people with these phrases. Like, these are invalidating because no, we know not all men are predators. The men who commit violent sexual assault, it's a tiny portion of the male population, maybe 10% of men that do it an average of 7 times before they get caught. And that's why so few men are guilty of this stuff compared to the population, and yet so many women have these terrible experiences. Because think about it, that's a factor of 7 for, every man who pulls this crap, because they get away with it and they get away with it and they get more emboldened and more emboldened and more emboldened, right? Because they got away with it. It became normalized, and that's the way they were taught to treat women by one or more authority figures. And that is a form of abuse of boys. Part of the reason teaching consent is so challenging because people raised male are taught to stuff your feelings away in a box, be afraid of them, be ashamed of them, feel guilty. I grew up this way. It is not fun. It does screw you up. It took me a lot of years to correct for this. It is still embarrassing for me to talk about feelings. I do it anyway. Yes. Does this mean I spend a huge amount of my day embarrassed? It's kind of tiring. But that, I'm not advising clients and I'm not talking about things in these videos that I'm claiming are easy. It's quite the opposite. I know how difficult this is to do at first, especially in places where, like YouTube, where I'm likely to get attacked. Same as social media, same as, all these environments. And I joked on Twitter, and I'm sure somebody will go, that wasn't a joke, but it was a joke. That I said, hey, I'm going to be playing Stellar Blade. I look forward to going back to being attacked for being a gender traitor as opposed to just being a bad Jew. So, I feel you. But abuse, especially violent abuse, we pretty much understand why that messes people up. But emotional invalidation, we're just starting to understand what that does. And I mean, professionals understand it. I mean, culturally as a society. And it happens all the time. It certainly happens in the teenage years. I mean, I saw this all through the comments Song got in her Taylor Swift videos. You're overreacting. You're too sensitive. You're making too big a deal out of it. You shouldn't be so any feeling followed, it could be worse is one. You shouldn't feel that way is another one. That this is why I flag the word should every single time. You make a big deal out of everything. You're taking this too personally. I don't see the problem. Now, I don't see the problem I don't see the problem, explain it to me, or I don't see the problem as a dismissal, right? It all depends on how that phrase is leveled. But that didn't happen. Stop making things up. I know I got that a lot as a kid when I wasn't making things up. I don't want to have this conversation. Somebody like, well, what if I don't want to have this conversation? There's a way of saying, I can't deal with this now versus I don't want to talk about it ever. When are you going to let that go is another one that is emotionally invalidating. Even though it can sometimes be well-meaning, it's emotionally invalidating. The one that, and this is another one where it can be an appeal for empathy. It can be a shutdown. How do you think that makes me feel? That's all how it's delivered, right? How do you think I was feeling at the time? How do you think I'm feeling as an attempt to get clarity in a conversation is one thing. But if somebody says, this upset me, and the response is, well, how do you think it makes me feel? That's a guilt trip, right? And people's moms do that a lot. Like, I've heard mothers out with their kids say that to them. Other things are, toughen up, suck it up. I'll give you something to cry about. I got that one a lot as a kid. Cheer up, don't cry. And I think a lot of you might be thinking right now, well, that's everything. That's everything I could possibly say. No, it's not. If you think that, congratulations, you had an invalidating upbringing. And if your social life is shit, that could be part of the reason why. And don't worry, there is hope. Again, a lot of these things are very subjective. And this is why I do one-on-one work. We can go through these things in detail and, extract the nuance of them and really get to the bottom of it in a way that you can't do in a video like this. Now, neglect we sort of understand, but if you grew up where one parent was openly abusive, emotionally or physically abusive to the other parent, the abused parent likely neglected you as the kid. And this is a real doozy of a double team because the abusive parent was abusive. But then you get into the very complicated emotions of the non-abusive or abandoned parent being in way over their head. And then you get these invalidating statements like, they did their best, give them a break. I talk to people who have therapists coercing them into forgiving their families. And I don't think the therapist thinks they're being coercive. I think they're being helpful. And that's what's so insidious about emotional invalidation. People think they're helping. Cheer up. Let me see you smile. That girls get that more than boys. Boys get more toughen up or be a man, be strong. Why the fuck do we tell 8-year-olds to be men? Let them be 8-year-old boys. 8-year-old boys are awesome. I was in the Shoppers Drug Mart, very Canadian reference, the other day, and this guy was there with his son, and this kid was into everything. And the dad, this was clearly common, and the dad was clearly annoyed, but he kept his voice very even. Well, the kid was into everything, and I'm like, good on the dad for not coming down hard on his kid, but I would not want that to be my kid, So, yeah, but that that invalidation leads us to believe that our feelings don't matter or that our feelings are wrong. And this will fuck you up. One of the things that being raised this way does is makes us not trust our own judgment regarding social situations and people. And this can make relationships very difficult. I see comments from men all the time like, of course I fear women. They have a capacity to destroy me like nothing else can. And it's like, but hold up. If you have boundaries, you don't let someone in all the way without some screening. That suggests that there's a certain, and this is not blame. This is saying, no, there's something you can do about that. If you have that fear of women as an abstract, once you get to know women friends, that's great. But the idea of that abstract idea of a relationship with a woman terrifies you, there could be some emotional invalidation going on. And again, this is not to blame you. This is to say there is hope. There is hope for better. You can work on the underlying issues that are leading to that fear. And notice I said not get over the fear. It's work on the underlying issues leading to that fear. Because you never just get over fear. It's not just like, oh, okay, I'm not afraid anymore, right? That feelings are data, right? That fear is telling you something. And just trying to ignore it is further emotional invalidation. And that's what happens to a lot of men, a lot of women too, but this is Manly Monday. Oh, don't think about it. Oh, it's nothing. Oh, toughen up. All that stuff. Ignore the feeling. Ignore the feeling. Ignore the feeling. Now, even if there's nothing you can do about a shitty circumstance or even a good circumstance at the time, that doesn't mean you have to ignore the feeling. You can acknowledge the feeling and name the feeling, and you don't have to do anything about that feeling. And a lot of people start going, well, if I feel it, it's going to feel bad, and then I'm going to feel powerless. Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Think about it. What feels more powerless? Acknowledging the feeling, going, it's there. It will eventually have to be dealt with, but not right now. Now is not the appropriate time. Does that feel more powerless? Or there's nothing I can do, forget it, I can't do anything about it. That feels more powerless, right? And we teach boys that forget it, it's nothing. Well, okay, women do that too, but in a different way. It's nothing, as opposed to it's nothing. You can practically feel the guy hitting himself when he starts talking that way. And that is replicating invalidation right there. Now, what happens with this is you end up being too hard on yourself. And that means every social situation becomes extremely fraught. Handling criticism becomes very difficult because you're so self-critical, you're choking on it. You can't take any more because you're beating yourself up a lot of the time. Feeling grateful for things that people do for you, or, recognizing that people care, becomes scary because it feels like becoming reliant on somebody, which, if you had an invalidating childhood, it's crushing. You reach out for emotional comfort. It's like, oh, cheer up. Stop making such a big deal out of everything. Right? People start speaking in language of, I'm protecting myself, or I have to put up a shield. Well, when you're doing that, and the other person, well, emotionally healthy or unhealthy, but even emotionally healthy people are going to feel shut out. They're going to feel kept at arm's length if you're actively having to put up a shield against being hurt, because that's sending the message that you don't trust that person. And you claim to be in a committed, intimate relationship, but you're sending messages all the time that you don't trust them because you don't trust people, and they are people. And so that is something. And there's reasons for all of this, okay? Having reasons doesn't mean you can't do better. It's one thing to understand the reasons. It's important to be able to talk about the reasons and understand the reasons so you can get a better plan, so you can feel and do better, right? Jealousy is a big one when you've been emotionally invalidated. You know, everybody feels insecure sometimes. Everybody feels jealous sometimes. And feeling jealous is, again, feelings are feedback, right? But if you are chronically, irrationally jealous, like your default state is jealousy, as opposed to seeing some things that aren't really appropriate. I mean, a lot of you guys can probably think of a relationship where you express that you didn't like a way a particular guy was talking to your partner. Oh, it's nothing. That's invalidating. Instead of, what bothered you about that? You know, it's nothing. It's not nothing. Your partner's telling you it's not nothing. If you keep seeing that behavior and it just sort of going on, and your partner doesn't seem to care that it's bothering you, that's not a great sign, right? It's one thing if it's someone's boss or something like that. It's like, look, I don't like it either. I can't do anything about it. At least they're acknowledging what you're saying. But, you know, a healthy relationship, people shouldn't, a partner shouldn't just be ignoring something that makes you uncomfortable. Now, that's not the same as telling your partner how to dress or wanting to change your partner. It's talking about concerns. But it's understandable that somebody would get jealous when a partner is invalidating their concerns regarding a specific person or other men in general. But if they don't do that and you are still jealous of every guy who crosses your partner's path, that's a potential sign of a problem. And you have your reasons. Yes, you have your reasons. Your reasons are chronic childhood invalidation, most likely. And I mean, of course, being abused is invalidating and being neglected is invalidating. But the reason invalidation is so insidious is because it's often treated as, oh, they're trying to help. They're trying to toughen you up. They're trying to cheer you up. Cheering someone up isn't just, oh, cheer up. The other phrase I cannot stand is don't let it get to you. That phrase bugs me because you only say it when someone's already showing signs that something's gotten to them. So you're just, making them feel like shit about feeling bad on top of already feeling bad. The other one that has become a real smart person's invalidation is that's disingenuous. Disingenuous means a hypocritical or insincere reaction. It's not just somebody missed something because they had a legitimate emotional response. It's accusing somebody of playing dumb. And this is this thing that's floated into discourse, and people don't understand when I go, nope, when somebody hits me with that. Because if somebody's going to claim that my methods or my arguments are disingenuous, that speaks to intent. And one of the big rules I have for deciding somebody is a waste of time is when someone is constantly questioning my intents. I've spent too much energy with people trying to prove to them that I have good intents, too much time in political spaces. If somebody is constantly making you prove that you're not secretly pro-Gamergate or secretly transphobic or secretly this or secretly that, that is an ongoing test that you will never pass. It is chronic invalidation, and it's not healthy. But everybody does that. Exactly. We live in a soup of this stuff, which is why there are so many lonely people, why there are so many, men who are afraid to date, why there are so many women who they say they can't be bothered, but I actually think everybody's just terrified. Okay, so what do we do about it? It is literally a process of rewiring your brain to treat your feelings as valid. And one of the things I am strident on for my own recovery is don't misuse I feel statements. I feel must be followed by a feeling. Because if somebody said, I feel jealous, okay, that doesn't necessarily mean someone's doing something wrong. It's the beginning of a conversation. You can accept someone is feeling jealous without accepting responsibility for it. Instead of, you're trying to make me jealous. It's an accusation of intent. Even if it seems like you're trying to make me jealous, it's still better to just go, I feel jealous. The problem with growing up invalidated is that so many of these accusatory statements, these statements riddled with blame, things that are actually normalized emotional abuse, as well as statements of invalidation, they are such a part of your vocabulary that it is an ongoing process to remove the whole thing from your lexicon. I see so many people use, oh, she's just being a bitch. He's being a little bitch. I mean, that's an invalidating statement. And it's one of those words like ginger. Yes, I guess it describes me. I know it's something people call me, but I don't like the word. And I really appreciate it when people acknowledge that I don't like the word bitch. People are like, you don't like the word ginger? I really don't. Have you ever seen ginger? It is not this freaking color. But this is what we got called, and it is used to distinguish bottle redheads from natural redheads. But it's like Carrot Top was the thing before ginger. Why do we always get named after food that nobody eats on its own? Like we are not food. We are people. And it's just become so normalized that I refer to myself that way just as a descriptor. I've internalized it. And I think that's part of the reason I like Beast from X-Men. Guy walks around sometimes calling himself Beast. Though Beauty and the Beast redeemed that. The Disney movie. But yeah, it is a very frustrating process of reprogramming this. And it can feel huge. It can feel impossible sometimes. And if you're in a relationship where both of you may love each other, but you've both got work to do, it can be very hard because you feel like, you feel overwhelmed. So you start telling yourself a story about that overwhelm. Like, well, I'm the only one that's doing any work. I guarantee you, if you say that to your partner, you will get pushback. And one of the things that chronic childhood invalidation, remember I said off the top how it's making you an asshole? People who were invalidated as children, this is something I had to learn myself. You make statements of blame to other people that you don't realize are statements of blame because you were taught that was how people express their feelings. So things like, look what you made me do. You know, you made me lose my temper. You made me freak out. No, 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 no. Those are actually profoundly abusive statements. Nobody makes you freak out. Something they did might have triggered a bad reaction in you. And again, your feelings are valid. If your feelings are valid, you don't have to say anybody made you. And if somebody is knowingly pushing you past your breaking point when you're saying, look, I can't take this, and they just keep on you, that's abuse. That is abuse. And some guys right now may be going, yeah, but every woman in my entire life has done that to me. It's abuse. It is. Not everybody talks to the men in their life that way. And I've seen families where women are just on the guy. I mean, men are on them in a different way. I'm finally watching Louder Milk because everybody's like, you should do it. You'll love it. I don't love this show yet because there's so much gross. And I finally got to the episode of Louder Milk's dad. And it's supposed to be comically abusive. There was nothing comical about what this fictional father did. It was just zero boundaries at all. Horrifying. And yes, it's a show about recovering addicts, but I didn't feel like the show lampshaded that this isn't cute, this isn't funny. I was just left going, every single person on this show is terrible. It's the blind leading the blind, but okay, I think Louder Milk's an asshole, but I see how he got there. And this is the issue a lot of the time with addiction counseling, is that if you're not super aware as the sponsor, as the counselor, as the group leader, that you don't have it all figured out. One of the most important things I think I do is model making mistakes and owning it, model making corrections and saying, I have to do this, listening when other people give me feedback, and being open. Like when I actually want advice, I'll ask. If I don't want, unsolicited advice right now, it's like, not now. But one of the things I have found incredibly helpful myself is validating other people's feelings when they're expressed as feelings. In the process of validating my own, I find going out to go in helps a lot, because if other people deserve it, well, I'm a human and so do I. And I will do this even for people I'm angry at, even for people who are being shitty to me. I never lose sight of the fact that the human I am arguing with is a human with feelings. And it's not okay to just stomp all over someone's feelings, be abusive, That doesn't mean it's not being sarcastic if somebody's being a dick or anything like that is completely wrong. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying you have to have limits. You have to be aware that's a human being. If you're making excuses the way both, not even extremes anymore, people who get involved in any kind of political movement, I see invalidating language all the time. And I mean, the groups that I get the documentation and, the memos from and all that, they don't use invalidating language. But then I see the people who sent me the emails on Twitter being invalidating, even though they sent me the documentation saying how not to be invalidating. Social media just sucks that way. Nobody's perfect this way. You are going to slip up. But what you'll also see is when you do get it right, when you do go, can we please just deal with how you're feeling? I care about what you're feeling. I want to know. Just like, please just tell me how you're feeling. Pull up a feeling wheel, an emotions wheel, and say, what on this wheel are you feeling? Well, I feel that you are wrong. No, that's not a feeling. That's an invalidation. You're wrong is an invalidation. The person might be wrong, right? The person might be wrong, but keep in mind, that doesn't feel good to hear. People are like, oh, but I like hearing I'm wrong. No, that's not true. You like the ability to be able to make the correction, right? The brain doesn't like being wrong. The brain doesn't like being insulted. Certain people have kinks that way, but, you know, that feels good because it feels bad. But this stuff is fairly universal. And the problem is that because people are so in that defensive crouch that I've mentioned, so in this attitude of protection, which means projection and deflection, win at all costs. Nothing's getting in, so nothing feels better. And you end up not realizing how critical you're being when you're defending yourself from criticism, how battle ready, like attack mode you're being when you're trying to avoid being attacked, all that stuff. Because you're so in a battle with yourself, you miss clues in the outside world. And that's how, chronic invalidation makes you an asshole. So a couple more things, because this went long, about how to start. Again, name your feelings. And become very aware of those invalidating statements. You're making too big a deal out of it. Oh, come on. Oh, you're such a whiner. All that stuff. Those are invalidating statements. Note who says them to you. Don't make them yourself. When you do make them yourself, catch yourself. Or if somebody calls you on it, acknowledge it. Trust me, you'll get better results. People are like, oh, well, that's giving in. That means they win the fight. No, it doesn't. It's going to be a process to get away from that. But what you ultimately have to end up doing is give up that need to control the other person. You can't. That person may say hurtful things. If they do, walk out. If you don't feel like you can walk out, possibly an abusive relationship, right? Because you should always, a non-abusive person will not have a problem with you temporarily taking steps back to cool off so the conversation stays on an even keel. If somebody's going, get back and fight, this proves you don't care. It's an abuse dynamic. Everything in my life is an abuse dynamic. Yeah, possibly. Mine was. And a lot of men are in this because they're so trapped in guilt, blame, and shame from invalidating neglectful childhoods, even when it wasn't openly abusive, that, yeah, it's everywhere. It's normalized. This stuff is. Why are you watching my channel if you want to be normal? I'm not normal. I'm better, right? Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session. Somebody can use it but can't afford it. Coffee.com/LeannaK. Thanks for watching Manly Mondays.